information contained in this report is based on preliminary findings only. Conclusions drawn are subject to change as the board is further analysed. At 2:52 in the afternoon on June 14, 1986, a Canadian Forces Twin Otter, number 13807, crashed on the side of a 7,000-foot mountain in the Kananaskis region, 40 miles west of Calgary. 8 lives were lost. The Twin Otter was involved in a large air and ground search for a civilian Cessna 185, which had been missing for over a week. During the crash, the Twin Otter burst into flames, starting a small forest fire. Military personnel involved in the ground search for the missing Cessna arrived at the crash site within minutes of the accident, followed soon after by search and rescue specialists. However, they were initially unable to approach the wreckage due to the intense heat generated by the fire. The crew of an Alberta Government Services firefighting helicopter working nearby noticed the smoke and flew over to investigate. On arrival, they dispatched 2 firefighters into the site, then began a waterbombing operation, finally extinguishing the fire approximately 1.5 hours after the crash occurred. The first rescuers into the site found the aircraft completely destroyed without any survivors. The Board of Inquiry arrived early the following day, assisted by investigators from the Directorate of Flight Safety in Ottawa, to begin the task of analysing the wreckage, studying the aircraft and crew records, interviewing witnesses, and retracing the history of Rescue 807. The crash site was accessible only by helicopter or by a steep 3-mile hike through dense bush from a road in the valley below. The wreckage lay in a path approximately 750 feet long and 150 feet wide down a rocky slope which varied in steepness from 20 to 60 degrees. At the top of the slope was a very steep, almost vertical outcropping of rock. The initial impact point was on a ledge at the base of the rocky outcropping at the 5,950 foot level of the mountain. Examination of the ground scars indicated that the aircraft crashed on a southwest heading, contacting the ground left wing first, with a bank angle in excess of 60 degrees. Measurements taken at the initial impact point were indicative of a low forward speed and high rate of descent at impact, leading investigators to conclude that the aircraft had encountered a stall condition. The impact tore off the left wingtip cap and fuel tank and caused the left wing to break in a rearward direction, separating at the fuselage and finally coming to rest 80 feet from the initial impact point. The left propeller contacted the ground, shattering all 3 blades. This was the first clue that the propellers had been turning at a high RPM at the time of the crash. The propeller assembly became detached, landing 300 feet away. The left engine was thrown 675 feet down the mountain. The left main undercarriage strut dug into the ground, resulting in a partial cartwheeling motion, causing the nose to impact the ground and causing the right wing to break in a forward direction, separating from the fuselage at the wing root. Blue smears on the propeller spinner, marks on the right propeller blades, and marks on portions of the cockpit indicated that the right propeller had penetrated the cockpit during the crash. The entire tail section also snapped in a forward direction just after the cabin rear bulkhead, although it remained attached by the overhead wires. The fuselage and tail continued over a rocky ledge, breaking several large trees and spraying fuel from the severed wing strut attachment points. The fuel ignited as the fuselage continued backward down the slope, rupturing the belly fuel tanks and causing an explosion. The fuselage finally came to rest in an upright position approximately 550 feet from the initial impact point and was almost totally consumed by the intense fire. Preliminary examination of the engines and propellers showed that both engines had been developing high power at impact. This was further confirmed when the engines were stripped and examined by the Quality Engineering Test Establishment in Hull. All of the control surfaces, control actuators, wings and tail section were examined but did not show any signs of pre-impact failure, nor was there any sign of an in-flight fire or other airborne emergency. Witness reports, weather reports and satellite photographs confirmed that the weather had been clear and sunny without any appreciable winds. From this, investigators discounted poor visibility, turbulence or downdraft activity as cause factors of the accident. The search for the missing light aircraft, coordinated by the military, was a joint effort using military resources as well as volunteers from CARES, the Civil Air Rescue Emergency Service based in Calgary. On board the Twin Otter was a military crew of 3 comprised of 2 pilots and a flight engineer, plus 5 civilian volunteer spotters. They took off from Calgary at 12:42 to search an area near Exshaw, Alberta, at an assigned search height of 500.5. Over flat terrain, 500.5 means that the aircraft will be flown at 500 feet above ground, scanning half a mile either side of the aircraft track. In mountainous terrain, however, the pilot must contour fly the peaks, ridges, valleys and basins in descending 500-foot increments. But when a ball or basin is encountered, the decision to contour fly in it or simply overfly it will depend basically on 2 things. If a basin is small and shallow enough, effective search coverage can be achieved merely by overflying it. If, however, the basin is deep and wide enough to require a contour search, and if enough space is available to allow the aircraft to safely contour without excessive bank, then contour lines will be flown in it. In any case, the area will first be inspected from above and from the mouth of the basin to ensure that safe entry and exit can be achieved. This picture shows the basin with ridges on 3 sides. Witness reports indicate that the aircraft made at least 1 pass at about 6,600 feet along the top of the ridgeline, then descended to about 6,100 feet by the mouth of the basin before entering. The aircraft was seen to fly in a left turn at a constant height until about 6 seconds before impact, when the bank increased sharply and the sound of roaring engines was heard. It was down this slope that the aircraft crashed. Investigators were sure that the aircraft stalled trying to avoid the rock face, but they were still curious as to how the aircraft got into that situation. The reason became clear when board members flew in a helicopter along the same flight path as the Twin Otter. This photograph, taken with the sun to the south, casts shadows and provides definition. However, at the time of the crash, the sun was to the west, filling the basin with light, creating the impression or visual illusion that the basin was relatively smooth on all sides. The flight was made at the same time of day in similar lighting conditions as the day of the crash. The board members and helicopter crew, all experienced in mountain flying, found that the small outcropping of rock was a major obstruction in their path, quite different from the way it had appeared from above or from the mouth of the basin. The helicopter was able to avoid colliding with the rocks only due to its slower speed and shorter turning radius. The film Visual Illusions, produced by the United States Air Force Safety Center, details this illusion.
The same terrain features that may create a visual illusion with the sun in one position can look entirely different at another time. This terrain model depicts what appears to be a mountain range rising from the valley floor. If you are flying at low level in a high-performance aircraft, you could safely delay your climb to top the mountain for some time yet. Or could you? 2 to 3 seconds more of flight is all you're going to get unless you increase your altitude right now. You are being subjected to an extremely hazardous visual illusion caused by a combination of your flight path, the terrain features, and the position of the sun. Let's hold your position and advance the sun by several hours. You are on a collision course with a hill you couldn't see because it blended in with a distant mountain range. Here's a look at it from the side.
Let's take another look at the basin as the Twin Otter crew probably saw it, keeping in mind that you know the visual illusion exists. The Twin Otter crew did not. Here from above at 6,600 feet, from the mouth of the basin at 6,100 feet, and at 6,100 feet seconds before impact. The Twin Otter search speed is 95 knots with a stall speed near 63 knots. For Rescue 807, it was calculated that if 63 degrees of bank in level flight had been reached, the stall speed would increase to 95 knots, the same as the search speed. If Rescue 807 stalled at that bank and airspeed, it would take less than 3 seconds for a rate of descent in excess of 3,700 feet per minute to be achieved. Witness reports indicated that the bank may have been as steep as 90 degrees. Although the steep rock face was missed by a few feet, recovery from the stall was impossible with such a great rate of descent in the space available. In 1973, a tracker aircraft crashed near Smithers, BC, killing 4 people after stalling while attempting to get out of a blind valley during a search mission. In 1980, a single otter crashed in the Catskill Mountains of New York after encountering a severe downdraft. 4 lives were lost. Also in 1980, near Chibougamau, Quebec, a C-130 Hercules crashed with the loss of 8 lives after stalling during a turn. The Twin Otter was not the only aircraft to crash while searching for the missing Cessna 185. On June 6th, the same day as the Cessna 185 disappeared, a light civilian aircraft crashed on Mount Lougheed, killing 3 while searching for the missing Cessna. The missing Cessna 185 was finally found on the 19th of June. Its pilot and passenger were also killed. The causes of all these accidents may be totally different, however, they all have something in common. All the aircraft were either involved in flying in the mountains, or were involved in searching, or both. Although the final cause factors in the crash of Rescue 807 must still be decided upon, one message is clear. Searching in the mountains is a demanding but essential and important function of many flying units. Insidious, unavoidable hazards, as well as the obvious dangers, will always exist when flying in mountainous terrain. It is only through thorough training, frequent practice, and education that we can hope to keep the odds in our favour when operating in a hostile mountain environment.